Okay, I am Conserve Southwest Utah's Community Outreach and Partnerships Coordinator, and I am really happy that you're here tonight. Thank you for attending this important workshop. Tonight, we are learning that everyone can be a firefighter during fire season. And I really like this phrase. It's a twist on a slogan that's used during National Wildfire Awareness Month. And I like it because it's empowering and accurate. We can all play an active role in preventing human-caused fires in Southwest Utah. We can be firefighters and help to protect our loved ones, our homes, and our public lands. So this is what's on the agenda for tonight. You'll be with me for the next 15 minutes as we do an introduction. And then we're turning the time over to Nick Howell, a Bureau of Land Management Fire Mitigation and Education Specialist, and he will be giving a wildfire prevention presentation. And then we're lucky tonight, George Hazlitt, a BLM Color Country District Engine Captain, is gonna speak to us, giving us a unique wildland firefighter perspective. After George, we're going to return to Nick for about 15 minutes of Q&A. Thank you for submitting your questions in advance. They've been great. And then you'll see me again for some resources and how to amplify the wildfire prevention message in your communities. And then we'll turn the time over to Art Haynes, Conserve Southwest Utah's board president, for a thank you and farewell. I know we've got some school kids on summer break tuning in tonight, and they're really excited to learn a little bit about wildland firefighting. So this is going to be great, and definitely stay till the end. You won't want to miss our farewell message from Art. So to get started, when we discuss wildfire in Southwest Utah, it's important to acknowledge that these are the ancestral homelands of the Southern Paiute people, and specifically of the Shivwits Band, who have stewarded present-day Washington County since time immemorial, or time beyond the reach of written record or memory, and they continue to steward this land today. This map shows 15 of the historical groups of independent Southern Paiute people who lived here before the arrival of settlers. The traditional homelands of the Shivwits Band are shown here in light yellow, and their 28,000 acre reservation is outlined in bright green. As the original caretakers and stewards of this land, the Southern Paiute people historically engaged in the intentional lighting of small controlled fires, today called controlled burns, in Southwest Utah. Controlled burns reduced flammable organic matter. They restored ecosystem balance and health. They recycled nutrients, and they helped to prepare an area for agriculture. So we acknowledge that indigenous fire practices have shaped the land and promoted ecological health. Nick will talk a little bit more about this in his presentation as well. So I want to honor the fact that many of you are here tonight because you were personally impacted by the devastating fire season we experienced in Washington County in 2020. 4 human-caused fires burned huge swaths of the Red Cliffs National Conservation Area and Desert Reserve, and they had major impacts on neighboring communities. Maybe you watched as thick clouds of fire retardant were dropped in your backyard, or maybe you were evacuated from your home in the middle of the night. Maybe you saw the flames of the Cottonwood Trail fire jump 4 lanes of I-15 and rush toward your vulnerable home. Maybe you were trapped on I-15 as the Cottonwood Trail fire raged around you. Maybe you were devastated by the destruction that you witnessed in Red Cliffs following these fires, and you felt like you lost a friend, a beloved landscape, a beautiful trail, a special vista. When I visited the Cottonwood Canyon Wilderness after these fires, I was really shocked to see the neon pink fire retardant dripping down the walls of the canyon like blood. It was a powerful image that had a big impact on me. And maybe you grieved the loss of life that occurred. Wildfire mortality surveys conducted by the Bureau of Land Management showed that perhaps as much as 16% of the threatened Mojave Desert tortoise population in Red Cliffs perished in these fires. So whatever your reason for being here, thank you for your commitment to preventing the unnecessary destruction of human-caused fires. And we know once again that it's an incredibly risky year for wildfire in Washington County, and there are a number of reasons why. It's increasingly hot and dry. We're experiencing prolonged heat waves and declining snowpack. The Washington County Water Conservancy District just sent an email out a couple days ago about how it's the driest May in 127 years. The US Drought Monitor currently has Washington County in a D3 extreme drought phase. Fire danger increases in D3, native vegetation is stressed, stream flow is low. Historical fire trends here are concerning. Data collected for the Habitat Conservation Plan analysis area. So this is where threatened Mojave Desert tortoises live in Washington County. Great data collection has happened here over the years, but this is an area where we know that 207 fires have burned between 1976 and 2019. 266,000 acres have burned in these fires, and 57,000 of those acres have double burned, showing that we have kind of a vicious burn-reburn cycle going on here. And as all of this is happening, we're still seeing continued growth. New developments are creeping into foothills and mountains, more fire-prone terrain. There's a really high percentage of structures at risk for wildfire here in Washington County. And this all boils down to Southwest Utah being considered one of the riskiest areas in the US for wildfire. So risky, in fact, that Washington County, and specifically Dameron Valley, was featured in a May 16th New York Times article about wildfire risks in the US. Our county was a case study for considering the relationship between fire risk and development in an area where the impacts of a warming climate are very real. This New York Times reporting shone a spotlight on Southwest Utah through its exploration of an important report that was released this May. This was the 5th National Climate Risk Assessment Fueling the Flames report by the First Street Foundation. And this report features a model that estimates wildfire risk on a property by property basis with a 30-meter resolution, so pretty tight granular resolution across the entire United States and up to 30 years into the future. Some of the factors that feed the model include a location's proximity to combustible fuels, historical weather patterns, previous fires, and warming climate conditions. And based on the First Street model, this is what we learn about wildfire risk here in Washington County. At least 93% of properties here have at least a 6% chance of experiencing a wildfire in the next 30 years. Approximately 95,000 properties here in Washington County have this 6% chance of experiencing a wildfire in 30 years, compared to 77,000 in Utah County and about 35,000 in Salt Lake County. So Utah, we see, leads the nation with the highest fire risk when measured as a share of all properties, and Southern Utah leads the state. So let's look at the predictions for Washington County a little more closely. We see that this year in 2022, almost 96% of all properties here face at least a 0.03% risk for wildfire. This 0.03% figure corresponds to at least a 1% cumulative likelihood for experiencing wildfire over a 30-year period. So it's a baseline. But this doesn't sound so bad. 0.03% risk, that doesn't sound very high. But we're not just looking at wildfire risk this year, we're looking out 30 years into the future, into an increasingly hot and dry Washington County where wildfire risk grows each year. This risk is compounding and cumulative. And one incredible component of this First Street reporting is the ability to use its risk factor tool to calculate the wildfire risk at your own property. So this example on the right-hand side of your screen is from my home in Washington City. I learned that my home has a 0.48% chance of experiencing a fire this year in 2022, that in 2027, that risk increases to 3%, but that over the lifetime of my 30-year mortgage, there's actually a 1 in 5 chance, a 20% chance that my property will experience a wildfire. So my house is pretty close to a beloved portion of public lands. I'm about a mile away from the Red Cliffs National Conservation Area. And in 2020, the flames of the Turkey Farm Road fire were visible from my backyard. The smoke was thick. It's really important to think about the relationship between public lands and wildfire, especially in a county where 75% of the land is public, including Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Forest Service, and various wilderness designations. And this is what makes Southwest Utah so special. We're incredibly lucky to live in a place where public lands are easily accessed and provide so many health, quality of life, recreation, and economic benefits. Wherever you live in Washington County, you are a stone's throw from incredible public lands that belong to all of us and enrich our lives. And the behaviors that occur on and adjacent to these public lands can have a direct impact on you. Irresponsible, unsafe, illegal behavior around fire on public lands impacts all of us in public and private spaces. It impacts our homes, our families, our favorite places to hike, bike, enjoy, and find peace, our health, safety, and even economy. So that's why we're here tonight, to learn how we can all be firefighters this season and how we can amplify the wildfire prevention messaging and education in our communities to prevent human-caused fires. So now I am going to turn the time over to Nick. Give me one moment. I'm the woman behind the curtain tonight, and it takes a bit of time to switch between PowerPoint presentations. Okay. So Nick works across a 5-county region of Southwest Utah. So his presentation includes examples of firefighting work in Washington County, in addition to Iron, Kane, Beaver, and Garfield counties. I really like that Nick's presentation is interactive. It includes polls to gauge your knowledge of current fire restrictions, and also links to fire websites that we'll explore together so you can have the resources you need for safety this summer. I want to let you know Nick will discuss defensible space and home fire safety, but that's not the focus of his presentation today. So if you'd like to schedule a defensible space fire safety presentation for your community, you can contact Nick after this presentation, and we will be providing a follow-up email with all the links and helpful resources you see today. So take it away, Nick.
All right, well, thank you so much, Sarah, and it's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, like Sarah said, we're all in this together. She really did, Sarah set the bar really high, really nice intro to the presentation, so I greatly appreciate that. During the conversation of how we organize this presentation and some of the focus areas we want to spend time on, a lot of your excellent questions that you send in really did help us construct this presentation, and it will hopefully provide some more benefits because of those questions. So thank you so much, those that sent questions in, they were fantastic. And the last thing I want to do is waste your time today, so thank you very much. And again, like Sarah said, the focus today is primarily on human-caused wildfires, especially after the 2020 fire season and the impacts that had to many of us that are online tonight. So with that, I'll move forward with my introduction. So like Sarah mentioned, my name is Nick Howell. I work for the Bureau of Land Management. I've been in public safety for a long time, public service. I've been with this agency for a total of 22 years. Excuse me. So I've spent the last 14 years as a wildfire investigator and community fire planner, and the same amount of time, 14 years in fire prevention and education. I earned my public relations, my communications degree at Southern Utah University. And then I went back to school to engage in some continuing education in natural resource management to become qualified for the position that I'm in today. And then I've spent a fair amount of time at Utah Valley University in their wildland fire management program as well. So yeah, I guess with that, let's go ahead and get into the presentation. So some of the topics that we're going to be talking about this evening deal with, we're going to look at some stats from basically 2020 to current time. Just keep in mind that some of those numbers we've since I sent my last updates into this presentation, there have been fires since. We'll get more into that in just a minute. But the other thing I want to talk about this evening is some of the ecosystem challenges that Washington County faces. The challenge of this presentation was really all of these topics that we're going to focus on this evening. You could spend an entire night on any one of these topics. So really, we're going to be scratching the surface and getting into the things that hopefully matter most to you. We're also going to talk about what we as an agency and our interagency partners are doing for fire prevention. There's a lot going on right now, so I'm excited to share some of those things with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about community fire councils. We have a lot of communities at risk here in Southwest Utah. And my focus isn't only on Washington County, but it's really Southwest Utah in general, just because there's a lot of different ecosystems and different challenges that come into play depending on where you live and where you're located within Southwest Utah. And it's all applicable to Washington County, of course. We're also going to show you some resources, some online tools that you can navigate throughout the summer and really every summer to hopefully keep you more informed and up to date on some of the wildfire incidents that we're managing. And also we're going to touch on some community fire planning tools that you can visit at a later time when you have time to sit down and read some information if you're looking for that. And then next, we're going to focus a little bit on habitat restoration. We've got a lot of different mechanical treatments going on across the public landscapes. And I'm going to talk to you about what some of the other agencies are doing as well to complement our efforts on the private and state land as well. And then at the end, we're fortunate enough to have one of my coworkers, George Hazlitt. He's here with me today. He's actually assigned to the fire over by Panguitch right now. So George, again, thank you so much for being able to break away and spend a few minutes with us this evening. All right, so to set the stage, we're going to start out with a short film clip and just a prelude into this. So in 2020, we had the Turkey Farm Road Fire, which was devastating to pretty much all of Washington County and many of us. And part of the restitution process were for the juveniles to take part in a fire prevention video. So the voiceover that you're going to hear in this video is actually one of the individuals that took part in the ignition of that fire. So with that, Sarah, go ahead and play it.
Growing up, I think we always looked at fireworks one way. You know, they're fun, exciting. We knew they could be dangerous too, of course. But as long as you were careful, which we thought we were, we could not have been more wrong.
Fire crews say about 200 homes were evacuated here in Washington City.
It's now torched more than 11,000 acres and at this point is 0% contained.
This comes as the Beehive State is experiencing one of its worst fire years, with the vast majority considered human-caused and entirely preventable.
In an update, 3 teenagers are facing criminal charges related to their involvement in the Turkey Farm Road fire.
The blaze cost more than $2.5 million to fight the flames and even more to rehabilitate the scorched land.
We can't go back and change that. But we can help others learn from our mistake. Please use fireworks responsibly. Always have water. Never use them near dry vegetation like grass or brush. And only use fireworks when and where it's legal.
All right. Yeah, and I'm hoping my voice sticks with me. I've been in a hiring panel all day, so bear with me while we get through some of the scratchiness. But yeah, so to answer some of the questions that were submitted that kind of go along with that video, fireworks are always prohibited on public land, right? They're never lawful to ignite on public land. That fire specifically in 2020 actually ignited on state managed land, and then it moved on to federally managed public land, but nevertheless had devastating consequences, and with some of those contributing factors that were taking place with the vegetation and the weather, it really did allow that fire to get really big really fast.
And Nick, we can actually launch our fireworks poll now.
Sounds great.
Okay, everybody. This is a poll where there's one single right answer. So go ahead and fill in your best guess. Where can you legally set off fireworks in the St. George area right now? So the one place, it's actually 16 places in St. George City area, you can set fireworks off in one of 16 approved parks and in some neighborhoods that are indicated on the St. George fireworks restrictions map. So these are the only places you can legally set off fireworks in St. George City. So I'm gonna stop sharing this now, share the results. You guys did really well. This empty parking lot was a trick. That was a trick answer. But yeah, it's one of 16 approved. So St. George has done a great job of really explaining in great detail where fireworks can be used this season. And no, there's not a ban on selling fireworks. That was one of the questions that came in. But you can learn about where you can use fireworks by visiting this website that I'll share with you. And there's an interactive map that's really helpful. So this map shows you the neighborhoods in the St. George area where you can use fireworks. These are the neighborhoods that are open. They're not under this red crosshatch. All of this land that's under red crosshatch or that's marked red, you cannot use fireworks, only in these open areas and in these green parks.
Sarah, thanks so much for showing that. So most of you probably know fireworks are regulated by the state of Utah and individual cities as well. So the Bureau of Land Management has no regulatory authority over fireworks themselves. Just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so some of our statistics, we've come a long way since 2020. If you look at what happened in 2020, it was really not a good situation for any of our firefighters or the public. 2020, we had 397 fires, 255 of those were human caused, for a total of 88,398 acres burned. And then I have them broken down by Washington County as well. So you can kind of see those stats, they're really five county in Southwest Utah numbers. So you can see how Washington County stacks up against the other counties in total. And we will talk about some of the specific challenges that Washington County has opposed to some of the other counties. And then if you move into 2021, the situation was a little bit better. We still had 120 24 human-caused fires. We still had 30,500 acres burned. And in Washington County, we went from 40 human-caused fires down to 29 fires, but 11 human-caused in 2021. So, and really here in 2022, we are doing a little bit better, but with that said, we still have a lot of fire season left. Our fire season typically ranges from the months of May to October, but with that being said, we do have wildfires pretty much year round anymore, especially in Washington County, just because the snow doesn't always reach all areas of Washington County, and those fuels and vegetation are usually available to burn. So before we move forward, I want to show you another online resource. I want to show you utahfireinfo.gov. A lot of you are probably familiar with that website, but we can talk about some of the resources that are shared on that page as well. So this will be a good test. This is actually when you go to utahfireinfo.gov, the first interactive map that pops up shows you the active wildfires. And this is a good test because we do have a couple of new fires that just kicked off a couple of hours ago. So Sarah, if you would click on a couple of those icons, those little fire icons at the bottom of the state of Utah, you can see the Left Fork fire. That's the fire that George is on right now. It's over by Panguitch, and it gives you some brief information. It shows you that the fire is the fire is almost 4,000 acres and 50% contained. So there's a little bit of information there, but there's also another dashboard in here that we can go to that will provide some more information. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that comprehensive fire information dashboard, that would be fantastic. So all the inputs to this website, how this works is they're GIS data inputs. So as soon as it's entered into our GIS mapping system, it's real time on this website, and this is a public site. So anytime you want to see what the wildfire situation is here in Utah and in your area specifically, you can actually go to utahfireinfo.gov and you can see we've got some real-time information. So if we were to zoom in a little bit towards that I-15 corridor, you can really see, so click on that little flame to the north of Cedar City, if you would. That's one of our newer fires. So if you click on that, there's not a lot of information there. The reason that is because that fire just started 2 hours ago. So it's showing that it's 7 acres right now. You know, it was basically entered into the system and reported around 3:42 p.m. So that's, you know, that's a pretty good tool to have, especially from the public standpoint, where you can get in there and you can see what's going on real time. And then I won't spend a ton of time on this, but you can, so there's a lot of stats that are updated into this as well. If you, Sarah, if you would go to the season summary tab at the bottom of the map, that would be great. All right, so you can see where our problem areas are, right? This shows you the total amount of fires, and it actually breaks it down by county in Utah. And to take it a step further, you can actually click on specific incidents to see what's going on. So if you'd notice, a lot of those heat signatures and a lot of those data inputs are pretty close to the travel corridors. And there's a reason for that. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. You know, the roadside fires are definitely one of our leading trends. All right, so we did have the Cottonwood fire a couple of weeks ago that you just clicked on. And I will talk a little bit more about that as well, because it's in the NCA and probably of more importance to those of you on the meeting tonight. So anyhow, this is just a resource where you can get onto utahfireinfo.gov at any time, and you can check this out for yourself if you have the wish to do so. The other thing we can talk about briefly is the fire danger risk. We can click on that tab. And so these are inputs that are actually updated by us individually on a daily basis, where, you know, if an area like the mountains, like the Dixie National Forest, they just received a whole bunch of rain. Like this whole map was for the most part, red and orange. And now we've got some blue areas that show moderate fire danger in those areas. And that's because they did receive some rain. So just know that this fire danger map is updated regularly. And it's another tool you can use just to see what the fire danger is in your area. But just know in Washington County, it's always on the higher end of the spectrum, which is probably no surprise to most of you joining us. All right.
Okay, and now we're going to move into our second poll of the evening. And this one is about current fire restrictions. So I'm launching this poll. We just want to see, do you know what are the current active fire restrictions in Southwest Utah at this time? Okay, let's end the poll. I'm going to share the results. So it looks like 43% of folks think that we're in stage 2 restrictions. We're actually currently in stage 1 restrictions, although there's one part of Washington County where stage 2 restrictions are in effect, and that's around the Springdale Zion National Park area. The rest of the county is under stage 1 restrictions, and Nick will talk with you now about what that means.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So yeah, Sarah's absolutely right. So most of Southwest Utah is in what we call stage 1 restrictions, with the exception of Zion National Park and those areas that Sarah mentioned around Springdale. You can also see what those fire restrictions are on that utahfireinfo.gov website. We do post all of our fire restrictions there as well. So what does stage 1 mean? Well, that's a good question. So for campfires, it means no campfires or open fires outside of any agency improved or maintained campgrounds. And in the unincorporated areas, even on private land, running water is required on cabins and home sites in those unincorporated areas. Keep in mind that the devices fueled of liquid petroleum, they are allowed. So all your gas stoves, those are perfectly okay for now. And then, like we mentioned before, there's no discharging of fireworks or any type of pyrotechnic devices, and that includes exploding targets when folks are out target shooting. Tracer ammunition is also on the list for stage 1 that is not prohibited, or it is prohibited. It's definitely a restriction. And then, in addition to the target shooting, we have our cutting, grinding, and welding of metal, especially in areas of dry vegetation. Those are prohibited acts when you're anywhere near public lands or vegetated areas. And then under those restrictions, we also have an equipment restriction. So it basically just requires a properly working spark arrestor on any piece of equipment. And in addition to that, there's a restriction on smoking near vegetation or outside of any developed recreation site and outside of a personal vehicle. So that's pretty much what stage 1 means. When we get into stage 2, that's basically no fires at all, even in the improved campgrounds where, the nice rings have been built by the different land management agencies and all the great work that recreation people do out there. And then if we were to move into what we call stage 3 fire restrictions, when we start getting into that, which I have personally never seen that, but that really comes down to just full on like area closures, which we try to avoid for the sake of the public, because we want people to go out and enjoy their public lands. And most of our other general fire restrictions, they cover all of our trending causes for sure. So this stage 3 situation would definitely be a pretty dramatic step and would consist of a full-on area closure if we were to get to that point. There's a lot of different factors that come into play when interagency fire managers talk about fire restrictions. We don't just say, hey, it's dry outside, it's time to implement fire restrictions. There's a whole list of criteria that we follow before we start restricting the public from their public lands. We're definitely here to serve the public and make sure everybody has access to those public lands, but at the same time, we want to keep activities responsible and try to mitigate and prevent any type of human-caused fire. So, all right, I think we're good to go to the next slide.
Okay, sorry. Anytime I check into the chat, it stops the screen sharing of the PowerPoint. We did just have a question come into the chat. With the extreme drought and the dry conditions we're in, why are we just in stage 1 restrictions was the question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And honestly, our conditions are fairly typical. Honestly, I don't want to dismiss, because that is a great question, but this is typically where we are this time of year. June is always a really dry month until the monsoons come in, and that's typically the month of June is when we see most of our it's when we see most of our human caused fire activity. And I think you'll understand a little bit better when I show you like what most of our causes are. The only difference between stage 1 and stage 2 is just the elimination of all open fires, which campfires, while it's on the list, it's definitely not the highest cause of fires that we typically have in Southwest Utah. But I think it's important to remember that we do live in a desert. It's always dry, especially Washington County. Your fire danger is always much higher. The big contributing factor, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, that really does play into a bad fire season is the amount of fuel or vegetation that is available to burn. So this spring, we had a ton of spring rain, and it did bring a lot of grass, which is a huge concern. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So, all right, let's see. So some of our trending human caused fires, most of our fires are caused by roadside fires. The Cottonwood fire last year, that was a blown tire on Interstate 15. That's what caused that fire. Honestly, a large percentage of our fires, probably upwards to 70% of our fires or human caused fires are caused along the travel corridors and our state highways. Some of those causes include, tire failures, just lack of general maintenance. People have engine issues, and that starts fires. We've got a lot of people out there dragging chains. They're pulling trailers. That's a fairly common occurrence. They'll lose bearings off of their trailer hubs, or they'll have exhaust system failures where that catalytic converter will actually fail, and it will shoot pieces of catalytic converter out into the dry grass and start a fire. So, and then we just have people that park hot cars on dry grass. That starts fires as well. So that's our number one human wildfire cause. So when I talk about these causes, just keep in mind it's strictly wildfires and fires across the interagency landscape, but not so much applicable to the cities. The incorporated cities have a whole different set of challenges and issues that they deal with, where I guess a good example of that would be the city fire departments really have a challenge with fireworks, where on public lands, I've seen 2 of them in the last 10 years, and one of them just happened to be the 2020 Turkey Farm Road fire. So it's really not common to have firework cause fires on public land, but unfortunately, things like that do happen. So the problems we have with campfires, we have an increasing transient problem. We have a lot of people out there with warming fires, even during fire restrictions. And usually those are the party spots, or in the areas that, we have large numbers of transients that are basically homeless, and they're cooking their meals. And, we try to do our best with those unique set of challenges, but that's on the list as well. All right. And then for a couple of years, like 5 or 6 years back, we really had a huge problem with cutting, grinding of metal. In fact, we had such a huge problem back in 2006 and in 2007 specifically. We actually launched an interagency specific campaign related to those human causes because they were becoming so prevalent with construction sites. And we experienced a lot of trespass fires on private land that, when those ignited, they would trespass onto public land and cause big problems. And we do see a couple of target shooting fires every year, primarily in the hurricane area and south of St. George. So I usually see 1 or 2 of those every year as a fire investigator. And then one of our less common fire causes on the human side is burning toilet paper. There for a while, I don't know what the deal was, but we did have a lot of people that were recreating on public land that were burning their toilet paper. And that was becoming a huge problem. It hasn't been as much of an issue over the last couple of years, but nevertheless, something to mention and try to avoid if we can. All right, so this slide should be extremely staggering and humbling. This is definitely not sustainable. So at the national level, back in 2018, our federal firefighting cost exceeded $3.5 billion. And as a taxpayer, like every one of you, I think we all know that is not sustainable, and it's extremely disheartening to see that amount of money going into fire suppression alone. This is just fire suppression. It doesn't, these figures don't include fire rehabilitation and all of the other expenses that go along with fires after the fact. All right, so now we're going to talk about some ecosystem challenges, and we're going to talk about the differences between some of the similarities and differences between the NCAs and some of the other parts of Washington County. All right, so Sarah set this up pretty good. She mentioned that, you know, our populations are definitely increasing. That's contributing to more human caused fires, but some of the other problems we have, especially along like the Highway 18 corridor, the New Harmony areas, maybe areas that are right in that transition zone, and not so much in the Mojave Desert, but are more so located in that Eastern Great Basin ecosystem, is we have, over time, we've been suppressing wildfires for so long that the pinyon and juniper encroachment challenges have become a real issue. It's just added more fuel to the landscapes. It's over time in certain areas, we've got unhealthy landscapes just because there's large amounts of vegetation that's been allowed to build up, primarily because we've been suppressing fires for a long amount of time. And there's other contributing factors that play into that as well, but that's one of the primary reasons. One of the other issues and management challenges that we have is the invasive grass situation. So across all of our landscapes here in the West, we have a cheatgrass problem. Cheatgrass is that really fine and brown looking grass that burns extremely fast, and some people compare it to gasoline the way it burns, but it's really really a problem here across Southwest Utah, especially when we get those spring rains. It brings that grass up, and then that's when it presents those huge landscape and ecosystem challenges for us, is when we have those wet spring months. I talked a little bit about the exclusion of wildfire and the fact that fires, for the most part, not allowed to play its natural role on the environment and throughout the landscapes, for the fact that we have a lot of communities that surround public lands and a lot of these landscapes. So a lot of times we just don't have the option to manage wildfire or conduct prescribed fires the way we would like to, just because there's too much risk involved with that. So long-term drought, we've already talked about that quite a bit. Long-term drought's a huge issue that I think everybody is aware of. And then there are some major differences between, so the district that we manage pretty much all across Southwest Utah, we have portions of it that are in the Mojave Desert, which would include the Red Cliffs NCA or the Beaver Dam National Conservation Area. And then a larger portion of our district is located in the Great Basin landscapes. And then over towards Garfield County, where you get into Kanab and some of those areas, we manage areas that are located within those Colorado Plateau ecosystems. And there's very different management strategies that can be options for how you manage for fire and after the fire, for that matter, in each one of those different landscapes. They have very different characteristics and present different challenges at different times. Okay, so this map, it's a little bit busy. The next two maps are a little bit busy, but the point I want to show you is these are maps of the NCAs. Basically, you can see all the cross hatching over the Red Cliffs NCA. those are basically different fires that have taken place over the years. You can see a lot of them overlap. I remember the years really 2004 through 2007 when I was running a fire crew. Man, it seems like all of Washington County was on fire back then in those years, and really presented a ton of suppression challenges for us. And a large contributing factor again there was all the invasive grasses that were on the landscape that year. So this map right here, focus in on the red dots. So all of those red areas are basically areas where you have those invasive grasses. You have, just large amounts of cheatgrass that exist. And that's really what's contributing in the Mojave Desert to some of those management challenges that really allow those fires to get huge really quickly. Now there is a silver lining, and I'll talk about some of those here in a minute when it comes to grass fires versus fires in a pinyon and juniper stand. But yeah, those areas, you can see there's no shortage of invasive grasses throughout our landscapes, and those present a ton of challenges. One of the big misconceptions that I talk to people about all the time is I have a lot of people tell me, well, why don't we just burn it all off? Well, part of the problem with that is it thrives off of disturbance, and that disturbance just happens to be wildfire. So really, the more cheatgrass burns, the more it's going to regenerate, and the more it's going to propagate the next year if the water is available. So it really thrives in these dry environments with high volumes of wildfire. All right, so yeah, I want to talk about problem areas a little bit, and Washington County is definitely with all the grass that's down here this year. I mean, we have had years with more grass, but we've already been down there. We've already had fires in the NCA. This was a couple of weeks ago. Luckily, this fire stayed small. One thing I want to clarify, looking at this photo, the fire was not related to the electrical grid system, and it in no way took place because of the electrical system or the power lines that you see there in the photo. But the point I wanted to illustrate was we're starting to have more fires in those areas where that cheatgrass exists. And this fire took place at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it still made it to 16.5 acres before we could get our firefighters all the way around it. So that just kind of illustrates, how fast these fires can move with no wind, basically. And then everybody's fairly familiar with what happened in 2020. The firework was caused by fireworks, and unfortunately burned almost 12,000 acres. So yeah, and you can see all the grass in that photo. You can see that, historically this area has not seen this type of fire, but because of those invasive grasses, it's really created a challenge for us and our firefighters in trying, if you have a good hot and windy day, a lot of times the relative humidity down in Washington County just makes these fires really explosive and hard to control. So one of the silver linings I wanted to talk about there is, from a fire suppression standpoint, is there's a huge difference between there really is a huge difference between a fire in the cheatgrass and the shrubs, and versus when you have a fire in the trees, the pinyon and juniper, or even the heavy timber. I mean, heavy timber, you can see flame lengths of 100 to 200 feet, where in the pinyon and juniper, your flame lengths are typically in between that 20 and 40 feet tall. And then in the grass and the shrubs, your flame lengths are much less. And fire, I guess what I'm trying to say is fires are easier to control in these areas. But the caveat to that is usually they get big and they cause a lot of short-term havoc on all of us and the wildlife in these areas, which is absolutely tragic. And definitely one of the problems with these fast-moving fires with this much invasive cheatgrass. All right, so just a few more photos. It just kind of shows you what the burn scars looked like. Let's see. So yeah, one of our other problems is, everybody knows Washington County is like the fastest growing county. St. George is the fastest growing city in the nation right now. And the more urban development we have in Southwest Utah, it seems to be pushing out into the vegetated areas more and more. So that's, of course, another challenge. As soon as you get a wildfire in a populated area, it just complicates everything tenfold for us as incident managers. And, you know, it definitely interrupts people in their daily lives. And it's just a bad situation for everybody. But this is just another part of trying to define some of the challenges we have here in Southwest Utah. So this fire, that slide you're seeing was actually in New Harmony a few years ago. But so yeah, here in the Southwest Utah area, we have a total of 183 communities at risk for wildfires. So that's quite a few. And you can see how the breakdown lays out across all the different counties. Washington County has 37 communities that have been identified by the state of Utah as a risk. And these are all the communities that we consider to be at some of the higher risk. Some of these communities have what we call CWPPs, which is basically community wildfire preparedness plans. And some of these communities they're designed to be grassroots, local driven fire planning initiatives where we can come in and serve as technical specialists and help identify what needs to be done. But really, this effort is designed to be a grassroots led effort within the community to generate that ownership and really start working on vegetation management and access. And I could go on for days about some of the contents of these plans. But some of the names you're seeing there on the right, those are the individuals that are currently over those communities. But with that said, you do have a really fantastic county wildfire planner in your area in St. George. Her name is Tiffany Martineau, and she's really great to work with. And she works for Washington County Emergency Services, but she's I believe the community wildfire planner for St. George. All right, so in addition, I wanted to talk about some of the things that are going on in the world of fire prevention. So we just barely launched a brand new statewide interagency fire prevention campaign. It's called Utah Fire Sense. And the website is utahfiresense.org. If you get a chance, go to that website. We'll provide some links at the end. But yeah, really over the last few years, I remember the days when I first started my career back in 2001, where maybe 10% of our wildfires were caused by humans and the rest of our fires were lightning. And now it's really flipped, especially the last 5 years. We haven't had the amount of lightning, which is part of that, but we're definitely seeing more human-caused fires, which is a huge concern. So I just wanted to mention all of this material is connected to Utah Fire Info, and it's all listed on the website if you have an interest in seeing some of the PSAs and videos. And, so anything on fire restrictions, it's all here. It's a one-stop shop at utahfireinfo.gov. Okay, so the other thing, when we do have emerging incidents and when our public information officers are ordered to start doing incident information, the first thing we do is we're on Twitter. So we have a Twitter account. It's actually belongs to the state of Utah. It's called at Utah Wildfire. Most of you probably are aware of that account, but that's first and foremost where we go. And then after that, all the information, when we have 5 minutes, is posted on utahfireinfo.gov. We've been trying to drive the public there for the latest incident information, but you can also get that information on Twitter. All right, so there's a lot of other online resources that would definitely be good, especially if you live in a community at risk. The state of Utah has a really fantastic website that's got a lot of different resources on it. There's a few different programs. One of them is called Familiarize. They have a Ready, Set, Go program. And then they have a couple of links that are related to what we call fire adapted communities. So there's a lot of resources on there that can kind of show you what to look for. We do a lot of that work internally and with our partners as well. But this forestry, fire, and state land site is really a good resource for homeowners that live in those high-risk areas. You know, a lot of this community fire planning, a lot of credit really should be handed off to the state of Utah. They've got some fantastic folks that have really worked hard with these community fire planners and you know, with all of us as cooperators, and they've really done a good job of trying to get some of these community fire councils off the ground and work with some of these communities at risk. All right, so there were a couple of questions related to defensible space and what does that look like? So there's so many different things that play into this. You know, this checklist that you're seeing on the screen right now, basically, when I show up to do a home assessment for an individual in one of these communities at risk, the first thing I look at is what we call defensible space and building construction. So a lot of this is building construction. Like, what is your home made of? Like, you know, where are your windows? Where are they located in reference to the vegetation? But this checklist is basically, really, it's a spring cleaning checklist, right? So it just involves basic things like cleaning your roofs and gutters, removing the pine needles and dead leaves, because it's usually not the flame front that burns homes down. It's usually the embers that fly through the air and land in what we call a receptive fuel bed. So if you're, I guess a good example of that is if you've got a bunch of yard furniture or you have a bunch of pine needles or dead leaves in your rain gutter systems, those embers are going to land in those areas, and that's the fuel bed that's going to start the fire that usually leads to structure loss during a wildfire. Multiple research studies have been done throughout you know, various universities, and study after study, it really shows that it's not so much the flame front that burns the houses down, it's the embers that are generated when trees torch out. The winds carry those embers into people's yards and onto their homes, and that's usually what results in the loss of a home. So you know, these are just basic things like looking for little tiny passages, vents for those embers to get into your attic and smolder. I've been on fires where, you know, we've put the fire out, the fire's gone through a community, and then 2 days later, literally a home will catch fire because one of those embers got into the attic and smoldered for a couple of days before it ignited a fire inside the home. So these are just some things, you know, to think of when you're looking at defensible space and community fire protection. All right, so this next slide is very interesting to me, fairly educational. So we found an excerpt out of the Deseret News from September 19th, 1855, and it's in reference to the New Harmony area. And it is really kind of neat to see some of the you know, the written works that came from that time, where it talks about long-term drought. It talks about, you know, the crops are really thirsting for water, but it also talks about the Native Americans and their, you know, their spirit of burning, and how most of the landscapes had a fair amount of fire on them. So there's just, you know, so much that goes into this. I thought you guys would, this is just too awesome for me not to share, but it's still relevant today, with the exception of the amount of fire you see on the landscape. So I guess the point is, I'd like to just kind of throw out there that these are very resilient landscapes, but at the same time, they've basically formed from the disturbance of wildfire over time. And, you know, even if we were to eliminate all of the human caused fires that we deal with on a regular basis, we're still going to have those lightning caused fires. So, you know, these communities that are at risk for wildfire, it's really in their best interest to try to do everything they can to make their communities fire adapted and make their individual homes with a little bit of defensible space. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show everybody is, if you were to log on to Utah State University's website, they have a huge catalog of repeat photography, and you can look back even shorter periods of time And you can see what the landscapes looked like. So this area is over by Kanab. It's over on the Colorado Plateau. This is Harris Point. You can see the top photo from 1936, and then another photo from the same location in 2006. So this really does a good job of telling the story of what's happened to a lot of our landscapes over time. You just have a ton of pinyon and juniper encroachment and these trees, they definitely have their place, and there's places that, they definitely should be. But at the same time, the more they encroach down into the flats and into those areas that they haven't historically been, it definitely affects wildlife habitat and the amount of water and the quality of water. Those trees use a ton of water. Okay, here's another photo from Alton. You've got 1909 at the top and 2004 on the bottom. So the author of this repeat photography, his name's Charles E.K. So sometime if you get a chance, get on the USU's website and just type in repeat photography, and you can see what some of these landscapes look like. So here's a photo of the Pine Valley Mountains, and those areas that are void of vegetation in the top photo, those are actually old chainings that they did back in the early 60s. And you can see how quickly they fill in. And we typically see that with wildfire as well. I'm going to talk about mechanical treatments a little bit, but when we do have wildfires that go through and they're able to, take out some of this pinyon and juniper down in the flats, it really doesn't take long before it starts coming back.
And Nick, we are just about at 7:10, so we better turn the time over to George. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, we will invite you back.
Awesome, yeah.
Okay, George,
Hey, thanks for having me. Can you hear me all right?
we can, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I was given a few questions from Nick, and I'll try and get through those in a timely manner. And if anyone has questions, yeah, please feel free to throw them in the chat there. But also, I'm on the Left Fork Fire and doing this over cell network. So if it starts to get glitchy, please let me know, and I'll try and improvise. But a little background about myself. Again, my name's George Haslett. I'm engine captain for the Bureau of Land Management in southern Utah and out of St. George. So for the Color Country and Paria River districts. So I started fire in 2011, came to St. George in 2017 as an assistant engine captain, and then in 2019 got an engine captain position. So moderately new to the St. George area. But that's kind of, I guess, yeah, how I got where I am. It sounded like there was some high schoolers on here that I don't know if they were looking for a potential to get into this job or not. If you are, throw your email in the chat. I'd love to reach out to you, and we can chat a little bit more about the job for sure. As far as the federal side goes, I'd love to reach out and maybe get you pointed in the right direction. So. The first question, well, the first two questions I'll try and answer together. It was a typical day on the job, and then that also kind of relates to why I like this job. And our typical day is there really is no typical day. It's always different, and that's what's exciting. If we're in the office, our day starts with a PT, hike or run or some sort of fitness routine. Normally we work out for about an hour and a half, depending on the time of the season and how much time we have. Once we're done working out, we do daily vehicle checks to make sure all our equipment works and is ready to respond to a fire if need be. And then after that, we run into our daily weather. We brief everyone in St. George, BLM and Arizona Strip BLM and the Forest Service all brief together, talk about who's available, what aircraft we have sitting in Cedar and Mesquite. We go over the national fires that are going on, how much they've grown, and then we normally end with a safety discussion. Nationally, that's picked out for us, and our culture is heavily safety oriented, as I'm sure you all could guess. So safety is always kind of a hot topic, a downtime discussion. So the job after that, that's really about the only consistency that we have here in the fire world. If you're on a fire, things can be very dynamic, and the day can, your daily duties can change dramatically. If we're in the office, normally we try and help out with any sort of extra BLM programs that might need extra bodies, or just physical labor sort of stuff. They generally like to ask the fire crews to help out with that, and gets us out of the office and out in the field. So we're always happy to do that. As far as on fires, though, the nice thing with working in the federal side of the wildland fire world is just because I'm an engine captain is my job title, I can do multiple different tasks on fire. So for example, on the Left Fork fire right here, I'm out here as a task force leader. So my engine crew's back in St. George, still available for IA, but I'm out here managing a handful of resources on a division. Other folks are out here running dozers or working on helicopters, working with the heli base that they've set up, or working here in camp. There's just so many different jobs that you can do in the fire world, which makes this career path an exciting one, because you're not locked into the same routine over and over sort of a thing, day in, day out. There's always something new to learn in a new position, to work on and get trained on and progress through. So as soon as things get dull or you feel like you've stagnated, there's hundreds of different positions on wildland fires, and you just pick a new one to start working on and kind of build your resume and your background, and that just strengthens our program the more diversity we have in our individuals. So so I hope that kind of helps with the typical day. There's man, I could talk for hours about what we do here, but it truly is an exciting job to have, because there's just so much diversity to the position. So a few other things that the reason why I do this job, I guess I wrote down a list of states I've been in just in the last 12 months, and I was shocked by how many. But I've been just since last May or June, I guess. My crew or myself has been in Texas, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas. So we get to travel quite a bit for this job, and if you like seeing the country and being outside, it's truly just a fantastic job to have when things get slow in St. George, and we get the rains for the monsoons, or we're outside of our kind of peak fire season. We go out across the country and help out wherever we're needed. So adds a lot of diversity and new sites. Right now, I'm sitting on a bluff, and I can see Powell Point out one window and Wilson Peak out the other. And if I was a little further south, I'd be looking at the peaks of Bryce. So it's always nice being outside. So another question was training, and that's a really good question. So we have kind of three different avenues that we do training in, and I think the specific question was how much training we do. And if I had to take a shot in the dark, I'd say probably 2 to 2.5 months each year. It could be considered in a training role. So the most basic answer to training is we have fire classes that we do in the off season. That it's just like you go sit down at a table and get lectured to or work on scenarios, and it's a good avenue to kind of get that base knowledge set across the board for the whole agency. Then after you're done with those classes, going back to all these different tasks that we are able to perform on the fires, we can initiate task books, and those task books are, if anyone was in the Scouts, it's almost like a merit badge book. They have a bunch of different tasks that you need to get through and checked off. And once you've completed those multiple times for different evaluators, someone feels comfortable putting you in that position by yourself, then you're fully qualified in that position. So So that's also training just on the job on fires. That's the only time we work on those task books. So it's real world experience, which is a good way to kind of mitigate that risk. And then when the other training kind of touched on earlier is just our daily safety talks and daily training for on the crews. Everyone we're kind of a learning culture, or try to be a learning culture. And so we're always trying to either inform each other about things that we know, or gain information from other people that have a different background in wildland fire. So so training is huge. That's one of our ways we mitigate safety as a culture. And let's see, the last kind of group of questions is the challenges that face specifically. I kind of picked specifically the St. George area, federal wildland firefighters, and then also just federal wildland firefighters as a whole. I apologize, I've never worked for a municipality or a state, so this is heavily focused on the federal side of wildland firefighting. But Nick did a really good job touching on our fuel loading. It's a very seasonal in St. George. Mostly it's related to cheatgrass is our main carrier of fires in St. George area. So if we have a wet spring, that generally relates to a decent amount of grass growth. So the mountain Pine Valley area and higher elevations might have a little bit of a stunted fire season. But down in the lowlands, once that grass cures, it really increases the chance of any heat source to receive fire and then grow from there. So on the flip side of that, there's kind of an interesting dichotomy in St. George, where if we do have a dry spring, that relates to drier, higher elevation fuels. So we might not have the grass loading in the lower areas, but we still have a high fire danger really close by in Pine Valley and even up north of Zion there on the south end of Cedar Mountain. So it's an interesting challenge to work with. Another challenge is due to the locations and just the temperature swings between Cedar City and St. George. We do have a lot of wind potential being generated from all the heating in St. George, and a lot of upslope, up valley winds that drive up the I-15 corridor and SR-18. So we have a lot of what we call fine flashy fuels, or fuels that are receptive to fire and grow really quickly. And then we also have these heating trends that are that produce generally high afternoon winds when people are out and about. That when we do get starts, we normally have a decent wind to push those fires around until nightfall, and then those winds can reverse on us and come the other direction. So that can be a pretty large challenge in St. George. We touched a little bit on the growing population in St. George, and that's another issue. We've seen in the last few years just a explosive amount of people out on public lands, and just due to the sheer volume, if you look at the percentages, if there's a 1% chance, just throwing that out there, that someone's going to start a fire, but all of a sudden we've tripled the amount of folks that are out on the public lands, that 1% just translates to a pretty good chance that people will have some sort of mechanical failure out there and start something. So just the number of people is starting to become a challenge. And with that being said, getting to fires now on public lands, we have run into some traffic jams here and there, and just reduced response times due to people coming out on tight dirt roads, sort of a thing. So that can be kind of challenging. And then outside of the fuel and the starts challenges, one of the larger issues that we have is kind of federal retention. I'm not sure if it's been kind of a hot topic on the news in the last year. Thankfully, there's been some extra funding that's been provided for wildland firefighters, but recently, it seems in the last 5 to 6 years, 7 years, our numbers of applicants have kind of dropped off. And with St. George being such a costly place to live, it's hard to hire those new seasonal firefighters who are only given a job for half the season and then have to find work somewhere else. So depth, I guess you could say, as far as folks that have been around is starting to shrink a little bit, because you can get paid to work at a fast food restaurant and stay inside and not sleep outside on the ground, and you get a schedule and you're around for 4th of July and the summer. So that's, hopefully an issue that will be fixed shortly, but historically has kind of led to a backlog in hiring and a lot of open vacant positions. So I think that wraps up for me. If you guys have any questions, I can definitely hop on later, but yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, for the opportunity. And yeah, I hope you guys got a decent perspective of the federal wildland firefighter.
Yeah, thank you so much, George. I'm just going to switch over to Q&A, and we've got 6 questions that came in. And then if anybody has questions for George, feel free to put them in the chat as well. But right now, let's turn it back over to Nick. The first question is, what penalties are in place to discourage careless people from irresponsible fire use?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, everybody on this call is a taxpayer, and that's a legitimate question. So when we do have human caused fires, first off, I'll say we investigate 100% of those human caused fires. And then if negligence or liability is involved, we pursue cost recovery. So that's a huge deterrent right there. You saw how expensive fires are. At any given day, if you have a fire that reaches the level where we need to use aircraft and dump fire retardant on that fire is automatically going to go to $100,000 or more. So we sometimes refer to it as the heavy hand of fire prevention, because we do pursue cost recovery where it's appropriate.
Who should we contact if we see an illegal campfire on public land around St. George?
Yeah, that's another great question. I actually received 3 of those phone calls yesterday. Unfortunately, we still have a huge problem. We try to really sign heavily our main travel corridors, and even outside of those main travel arteries, we really do try to sign and drive people to the websites and hit the media with all the notifications we can. But unfortunately, we still have illegal campfires. We still have activities that are prohibited, especially under fire restrictions. So right now there is a non-emergency number you can call the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and if it because of all the different land management agencies, they will definitely know which ones to apply the call to. And we have really good interagency working relationships with all of our partners that manage lands adjacent to our federally administered public lands, and they can address it that way. So I do have that phone number if you'd like it.
Yeah, we'll share that with folks in the resources we send out after.
Sounds great.
Okay. How might we as home and business owners assist in keeping fires at a minimum?
Yeah, so these are really great questions, and we're always looking to partner with businesses and local landowners, especially when it comes to messaging our fire restrictions and different fire prevention activities. We're always looking for new partners and looking for different methods to get the word out and share some of the new material that's been created on an interagency basis. Some of the other ideas I'm thinking about right now, especially in the local communities, you guys can help, I guess, be the squeaky wheel for some of the vacant lot cleanup activities and the vegetation maintenance that takes place on private land. Just being good stewards of the private land in your local areas really helps us out a ton. At the end of the day, vegetation management is always going to be key, and that's going to be a huge fire prevention tool right there. So if you have a grass problem or a vegetation problem in a flammable area, there's always ways that you can mow. Obviously, we don't encourage mowing this time of year because that can start fires as well. But when the fire danger is down in those low to moderate ranges, we definitely encourage people to do more mowing and trimming of the grass.
Should highways and road rights of way be sprayed with herbicides to reduce fuels and fire risks?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And again, vegetation management is key for sure. So the tools we're using right now, so the state of Utah has an agreement with UDOT and the individual counties to mow the right of ways. And so at least 2 or 3 times a year, they're actually out there actively mowing. And then when we get into those higher fire danger areas, they do have fire suppression equipment with the mowers. In the event that a fire is sparked, they can put it out quickly, and while at the same time they're mitigating the fire risk and the fuel problem in those areas. And that's really paid off huge. Over the last 5 years, they've been doing a lot of right-of-way mowing, and we've seen a huge difference. The fires aren't getting as big. And then at the same time, you're not dealing with dust and some of the other problems, water runoff, that you would have with chemical applications, if that makes sense.
Should there or could there be a moratorium on fireworks during periods of severe drought?
Yeah, I've been asked this question a lot. And honestly, like I hate to pass the buck, but honestly, this is a state and local challenge, and it falls within the state's regulatory authority to regulate those activities. But, as I said before, fireworks are always prohibited on public lands. And in those areas, even outside of fire restrictions, they're not allowed. So, yeah.
And this is specific to Springdale. I live on the Anasazi Plateau in Springdale. We have 8 construction projects, and the contractors throw their cigarette butts into the dry grass along the roadway. We've talked with generals on the projects, but to no avail. What else do you suggest?
Yeah, that is a great question, but it's a tough one at the same time. So where it's happening in your local municipalities, the best course of action is probably going to be to talk to your local fire marshals. So I did work for Cedar City Fire Department for 21 years as well at the local level. And I do know that most fire departments have fire marshals that are actively, looking for types of issues that could have catastrophic consequences. The other part to this question is when it comes to cigarettes, there's been a ton of research and studies done on that as well. And while yes, they can cause fires, the way these cigarettes are designed, they're actually designed to not cause fires. Now, I had 2 of them last year off of fires that I investigated, but honestly, over the last 14 years of fire investigations and with all the research and studies that I've been a part of and I've read through, it's not a huge fire cause. But again, just because the way these newer cigarettes are designed, really all the stars have to align for that to happen. But the caveat is it is possible, it does happen. And when it does happen, it could be catastrophic. So yeah, I understand this is not only, somewhat of a fire risk, it's also a nuisance. And, while this is definitely a local issue, I would encourage maybe opening up a conversation with your local fire authorities at the city level to see if you can come to a favorable solution that works for everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick and George. It is so clear that we need to invite you back to speak to us again. There's so much to talk about when it comes to fire prevention, and we've had really amazing questions. So we would love to have you back. I will be sending out a really comprehensive wildfire prevention toolkit over email before the end of the week. It's going to include links to all the articles, reports, websites, all the great resources we've considered tonight. And it'll also have tips and tricks for amplifying a fire prevention message in your communities. And then finally, it'll have invitations to upcoming habitat restoration projects in the Red Cliffs NCA. Conserve Southwest Utah volunteers donate thousands of hours to bringing wildfire devastated landscapes back to life for the benefit of not just wildlife, but our larger communities. So it's important work and we'd love your help. Just keep your eye out for an email coming out by the end of this week. And let me turn the time over to Art Haynes now, Conserve Southwest Utah's board president, and he'll see you out.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I promised Sarah that I would do this in 2 minutes, and it's getting late. I know everybody wants to get out and enjoy this hot summer evening, so I'm going to try and get this done in a minute. So thanks for coming out tonight. This is an important topic. I hope you had a lot of things reinforced that you knew, and you learned some new things. And my video is not going. There it goes. I know we live up in New Harmony, and I'm never going to look at a juniper tree the same way after tonight. So I learned a lot there. So thanks to Nick and George and Sarah for a great evening. Let me take just a few seconds to talk about CSU, Conserve Southwest Utah. Our mission is to advocate for conservation and stewardship of our natural and cultural heritage. And throughout our 15-year history, we've always advocated for smart growth and livability principles that support conservation and preservation. Most of you know us in our work for water, where we've supported actively conservation principles and worked against expensive, risky projects like the Lake Powell pipeline. We've also been active in lands where we've been advocating for traffic measures that actually do a better job of solving traffic problems without harming public lands, and been very active there in working against the Northern Corridor. We are a not-for-profit organization, and we depend upon your support. Normally, if we were meeting together, there'd be a donation jar at the door on the way out. Unfortunately, when we're meeting virtually, I want to invite you to go to our website, Conserve Southwest Utah. And if you just plug those three or four words into Google, you will see our website. Nose around there, see what we're up to. But I also invite you to click on the support tab and sign up for our newsletter if you're not already subscribed. And please consider making a donation to help defray tonight's costs and help supporting our work. And with that, I wish you all a great evening, and we'll see you at the next event. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.